Hello, folks, fellow parishioners of St. Jude's and Immaculate Conception parishes in the county of Louisa, Virginia, and anybody else who happens to be listening in. You're all so terribly welcome. I'm Dr. Larry Kavanaugh, and I'm going to be talking today about apparitions of Mary, in particular, an apparition of Mary associated with Einsiedeln in Switzerland, an apparition that's also known as of the Black Madonna of Einsiedeln. This itself can be confusing because there's quite a few churches, mainly in Europe, that have statues of Mary that they refer to as the Black Madonna, and that they have their stories associated with the appearance of Mary in this fashion. But this one is a particularly Benedictine kind of apparition. It involves Saint Meinrad, an early Benedictine monk who followed the Rule of Benedict famously well, and about Bishop Konrad of Constance and a vision that he had, which was a particularly striking vision. So please enjoy. We can't really tell the story of the Black Madonna without first telling the story of Saint Meinrad. Meinrad was a person born of a wealthy family in Switzerland and Germany, that area. And as a young man, he had a vocation, wanted to become a monk. He began his career around Zurich and was given a small monastery and became the abbot very quickly. And he was on a path to huge success. However, this is not quite what Meinrad wanted. Here's a statue of what Minard might have looked like as a young man. He wanted more peace, more quiet, more solitude, not the companionship of a lot of other abbots. He truly wanted to be a hermit-type monk. So he searched around the area, and near Etzel, he found a place where the citizens of the town said that they would feed him if he would become their hermit. And that's what he did. He built a small house in the woods around Etzel, and there he could read his books and do his contemplation and hopefully be the kind of hermit that he wanted to be. Of course, this was not to be so. The people of Etzel, if they fed you, they felt that they were entitled to consult with you, receive blessings from you, get help from you, get aid and comfort from you. And so Meinrad, in his place, was really pestered by the people of Etzel to help them. Not that he objected, but he needed more solitude. So he went a little further into the woods around Etzel to what's called the deep forest, the dark forest, the Finsterwald, as it was called. And near Lake Zurich, he found a place that was even more solitude. He brought with him a gift that he had received from Abbess Hildegard of Zurich, and it was a statue made out of linden wood of the Blessed Virgin and her baby Jesus. The statue was probably not black and dark when he received it, because linden wood is not a particularly dark wood. It could be that it took on its color later when people lit a lot of candles around it and the smoke from the candles darkened the wood. Linden wood would have been darkened by candle smoke. At any rate, he brought that with him to his new hermitage, which was called Einsiedeln, which means, I think in German, a hermitage, a place for one, a seat for one person. And he built a small chapel there. You can see the chapel and the statue of the Virgin and Child inside there, and Meinrad contemplating. He still wasn't left alone. He was just harder to get to. The people from the nearby villages still brought him food and occasionally brought him valuable gifts, which he always gave away to people. Meinrad was in contemplation. Here's a picture of Meinrad in contemplation, and who could imagine that nearby his hermitage, Lake Zurich, there would be one day a very large cathedral built, remembering Meinrad and remembering the blessed statue that he had brought with him. Nonetheless, trying to follow the rules of Benedict, Meinrad was very aware of hospitality to guests as being a very strong rule. The Rule of Benedict specifies that if someone comes knocking on your door asking for shelter or food, you should give it to them. Well, as it turned out, some thieves, robbers in the area knew that Meinrad was there, and they got the idea that since people had given him so many gifts, he must be very wealthy, they should steal all his stuff. So they knocked on his door, and Meinrad kind of knew that what they were and what they were up to, but nevertheless, the rules of hospitality. He said, "Come on in, let me give you a meal. Sit down at my table, I will feed you, and after I've fed you, then you can do what you need to do. Anything I have will be yours." And boy, what an invitation if you're a bunch of thieves. So they ate his food, and after they ate his food, they killed him. They beat him up, and they tried to take everything he had, which, sad for them, wasn't much. So beating him up and taking what they wanted and then running away, the last thing that Meinrad said to them was, "If you kill me, please lay me on my cot and put a candle at my head and at my feet." Well, they did that. They didn't light the candles, but it was later discovered that he did have a candle at his head and feet. The guys didn't get very far. As soon as they reached the town, townspeople got wind of them also, captured them, arrested them, brought them to a quick trial, and executed them. So that was the end of them, but it was also the death of Meinrad. Not surprisingly, for his efforts showing that hospitality came first, Meinrad is now honored as the patron saint of hospitality. So please, Saint Meinrad, martyr of hospitality, intercede for us. As famous as some of the stories about Meinrad are, the story about how the dedication of the new abbey in Einsiedeln was consecrated makes an even better story. The place where all this happens is in Switzerland, in the place where Meinrad had his hermitage, and boy, we have problems pronouncing the name of this. Online, the Google German-English pronunciation dictionary says, call this Einsiedeln, or Einsiedel, or Einsiedeln. When you're at St. Meinrad's in Indiana, they pronounce it Einsiedeln, Einsiedeln. You name it, they'll pronounce it that way, and I'm sure it's all wrong. Anyway, here's a partial map of Switzerland. If these names mean anything to you, that's where this thing is located. And moving right along. Here's the picture to reminisce of Meinrad in the days when he was a hermit, and he had that little cabin, and inside the cabin church was the statue of the Blessed Virgin holding the child Jesus. Now, I've been calling that the Black Madonna. I'm not really sure if that carving was black at the time that Meinrad had it and was using it as an object of adoration and prayer. Since it was made out of linden wood, that's a light-colored wood, so it might have been a light-colored object. How did it get dark? Possibly centuries later, as pilgrims lit candles underneath it, the smoke from the candles was absorbed by the linden wood, and linden wood does absorb quite well, and that blackened it. The locals like to continue to leave the statue black. Apparently there was some period in history when somebody tried to clean the statue, and they were stopped because they wanted the statue to remain black. It's because the forest that it's located in are also referred to as the dark woods. So dark woods, dark statue, you get the point. Well, about 100 years, 150 years or so after the time of Meinrad, along about the mid-940s AD, Blessed Eberhard a Benedictine, decided through some pressure to take the hermitage that housed Meinrad and convert it into a large abbey for the Benedictines. And he did this. He was quite a builder. His original Abbey Church may have looked like this, a much improved version of the church that Meinrad had built for himself, and may have looked like this. I can't guarantee that this was true. At any rate, it was in 948 A.D. that Eberhard declared that the church was finished, the abbey was ready to open, and he invited Konrad, the Bishop of Constance, and this is what Bishop Konrad, who is himself also a saint, invited him to come and dedicate that abbey church. Well, Konrad and a lot of followers came because it was going to be a grand ceremony. I think there's a picture of what the church may have looked like if you could open the doorway a little bit wider and see inside, to see that statue very, very prominently displayed there. As the story goes, the night before the dedication, Konrad and a bunch of his sycophants, I guess, other priests and fellow travelers, went for a midnight adoration in the chapel, and this was Konrad's custom, to pray beginning shortly before midnight and as his nighttime prayers. When Konrad entered the chapel, though, shortly after, he and his party apparently heard a great host of angels chanting and singing melodies. They heard everything, and they saw everything in the chapel bright as the sun, altar completely illuminated, and then coming down from heaven, they saw all the evangelists, Peter, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, including St. Gregory, St. Augustine, St. Ambrose, I'm sure St. Benedict, and finally, in addition to this magnificent procession, I'm probably leaving out some of the names, Jesus Christ himself came down, and his mother came down. And Jesus Christ himself, in Konrad's vision, offered a mass at that altar. And the angels were singing, "Holy God, have mercy on us, and in the court of the glorious Virgin. Blessed be the Son of Mary, who has come to this place and who is to reign for ages and ages." And according to Konrad, Jesus Christ himself consecrated the altar that he said the Mass on. And the Blessed Mother herself was there, as was, of course, the statue of the Blessed Mother holding the infant and surrounded by this glorious host of heaven. And that was Konrad's dream. And he may or may not have seen the statue darkened, or he may have just seen the statue in an original lightened state with lindenwood. At any rate, that's the current statue which is on display in the Abbey, and presumably it's not the original, but it's as close a model as we can come from. Well, the next day came, and it was time for Konrad to consecrate this chapel, and he said, "No, I can't do it. Jesus Christ himself was here last night. This chapel has already been consecrated. I cannot consecrate something that's already been consecrated." And he refused to go in and consecrate the chapel. Well, this was very disturbing to all the VIPs who had come to attend this great ceremony, which was going to be pretty great. And they insisted, they pushed him to say, "No, you've got to do this. All these people are here. You have to do it." Konrad said, "No, I won't do it. No, I won't do it." Well, they kind of pushed him into the chapel. And as the story goes, as he was pushed into the chapel, he fell down, and this great voice said, "You can't," and it was presumably the voice of God, saying something to the effect, "You cannot consecrate this. Stop. This is already consecrated. Stop, brother. This chapel has been divinely consecrated." So Konrad did not consecrate this chapel. It was not very long after this. By the way, here's one other picture of a 15th century version of a German picture of how the mother holding the child may have looked in the chapel. Not too many years later, around 964, only less than 20 years later, the existing pope at the time was Leo VIII, and Leo VIII issued a papal bull testifying that the vision of Konrad was accurate, that Abbey Church was in fact divinely dedicated, it's an object of worship, an object of adoration, and I'm the Pope and I say so. This is one picture of Leo VIII. Here's another picture of Leo VIII. And I do have to tell you something about Leo VIII. He was Pope from 964 to 965 AD. He was Pope during a pretty tough time for the Church. He was actually the anti-Pope from 963 to 964, and then he got thrown out of that job, and then reinstalled as the real Pope from 964 to 965 when he died. However, his qualifications notwithstanding, he did issue a valid papal bull, and that's what the Abbey Church stands on now. Here's another picture of the vision of the Abbey that would come, the Abbey of Einsiedeln. As you can see, the spelling there is even different from the spelling that we use today. And it's Mary standing guardian above a greatly improved, greatly advanced abbey. And today, the Abbey of Einsiedeln looks like this. It's quite the thing. And it's not the only abbey in the Switzerland-German area that has a dedication to the Black Madonna. She is quite the patron in that area. Just to close on that particular little story of the Abbey consecration, our current day Vatican has issued some actual postage stamps. This one is not a Vatican stamp, but a Swiss stamp. Helvetia would be the stamps of Switzerland, where they have issued stamps commemorating the Abbey and commemorating the Black Madonna. So it's quite the thing, and quite a good story. And so it's been more than 1,000 years since the time of Meinrad and Konrad and all the goings on at Einsiedeln in the dedication of the church there. After all this time has passed, you might want to ask the question as you see, what can we say about Our Lady of Einsiedeln or Black Madonna today? Well, for one thing, nowadays there's more than one place in Europe that has a statue of Mary that they call the Black Madonna and a story of a visitation associated with her. This is a picture of the Black Madonna in Poland in a place called Częstochowa. This is a picture of the Black Madonna in Montserrat. This Black Madonna is the patroness of Catalonia, so it's a Spanish Black Madonna. This Black Madonna appears in the cathedral in Chartres and has made the news fairly recently because it went through a restoration. The statue was restored from its original smoky black exterior, cleaned up, and it looks like the picture on the right. And that particular restoration was not necessarily greeted with universal approval by the parishioners. I'm not going to talk about all those other Black Madonnas because this is ours, the Black Madonna of Einsiedeln. And what can we say about her? Well, first of all, that nice little Abbey Church that was dedicated now looks like this. It's expanded quite a bit from the time of Eberhard, as you can see. But this is the Benedictine Abbey in Einsiedeln. A church and a very large abbey in the background. And then the foreground is a little shrine cupola with a statue of the Blessed Virgin. And inside the church is what is as close as we can come to the original statue that was, I guess, blackened by all the smoke of the vigil candles. And that's the one that appears in Switzerland in Einsiedeln. And there are other churches in the area which are also named after this particular Madonna, but they stem from this one. Even in the United States, if you go to Indiana, to southern Indiana, a little place called St. Meinrad, Indiana, which is close to the town of Ferdinand, Indiana, you will find a monastery called the Archabbey of St. Meinrad, which is an abbey that was formed initially as a missionary parish of that Archabbey of Einsiedeln that we saw a few slides ago, although it's become quite the thing in its own right, and worth visiting, and they give great retreats there. The Archabbey of St. Meinrad in Indiana, the main church is in fact dedicated to Our Lady of Einsiedeln, and in the St. Meinrad Church, this is the statue that you will find, and it's a good replica resemblance of our Black Madonna. And so she's become famous. The monks at the abbey there conduct a pilgrimage to her every year around the time of her feast day, and they've composed an antiphon to Our Lady of Einsiedeln. I am very dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem. Therefore the King has loved me and brought me into his chambers. Lady of Einsiedeln, pray for us. O God, you have blessed us with the loving protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Through the intercession of Our Lady of Einsiedeln, hear our prayers and keep us in your constant care. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. And to add just a little bit more to the fame of the story, the Vatican, bless their hearts, has issued postage stamps in celebration of Meinrad, the Vision of Our Lady there in Einsiedeln, and the Abbey in Einsiedeln. So that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much for listening.